Don't question it. That makes you irrational, dangerous. You're an obstacle to the utopia. Sound familiar? In Germany, the Verfassungsschutz, a word that equates to constitutional police, just labeled the second most popular party, AfD, an extremist threat. No trial, no national debate, nothing. Just a security decision wrapped up in holy moral righteousness. They're protecting democracy by bypassing it. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show where humans still speak without an algorithm's permission. Let's talk about the future. Not the wild, unpredictable, soul-filled one where we're meant to co-create, but the one being engineered from the top down by technocrats, platform prophets, and moral mathematicians. You might have heard the term TESCREAL, an acronym stitched together from a patchwork of ideologies, transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, lots of isms. Together, they form a narrative that says we must optimize the future. We must extend life indefinitely. We must colonize Mars. And we must prevent humanity from making bad mistakes, even if that means taking the steering wheel away from lesser minds. Don't question it. That makes you irrational, dangerous. You're an obstacle to the utopia. Sound familiar? In Germany, the Verfassungsschutz, a word that equates to constitutional police, just labeled the second most popular party, AfD, an extremist threat. No trial, no national debate, nothing. Just a security decision wrapped up in holy moral righteousness. They're protecting democracy by bypassing it. And that, my friends, is TESCREAL in action. Cold logic, controlled narratives, future worship as justification for present-day suppression. But there's another force behind the curtain, working hand in hand with it. It's called the Armageddon Lobby. You know, the ones who need the end of the world to push their vision of salvation, whether it's AI-induced extinction, ecological collapse, or digital demonic possession. They all shout the same mantra, obey. There's no time to think. Trust us to save you. Fear is their fuel and apocalypse is their marketing strategy. And TESCREAL loves it because it justifies everything, every restriction, every surveillance measure, every consolidation of power in the hands of the smart ones. Together, TESCREAL and the Armageddon Lobby have built the perfect holy alliance. Logic meets anxiety, math meets myth, silicon meets salvation. But here's the thing. You don't get to save humanity by deleting the human. You don't preserve freedom by criminalizing dissent. And you don't get to sell us peace by threatening us with collapse unless we comply. So today, right here on The Naked Truth, we start asking the questions the algorithm doesn't want you to hear. Because when apocalypse becomes policy, it's time to unplug the prophets.
Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's the one and only Frank Jacob with a powerful, very, very deep intro monologue. Frank, it's great to have you back. That was a great intro to our show today, this new episode of The Naked Truth. You hit all the main points very, very hard, I would say, very, very well, very succinct, and perhaps a really proper framework for this incredibly important discussion that is not being had in many places as the AI world builds itself around us at a breathtaking pace. People are still sort of stuck in 2006 or something. So, I'm glad you put it together the way you did, Frank, but literally for the past 4 years, my mind has revolved around this subject. I don't think anything else in the world matters right now as much as this, because it's the one thing that changes all the others, and it's already doing it. So I think that was powerful. You and I stumbled upon the same article at about the same time, as always. And you hit me up and said, we got to talk about this. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought was necessary. So what sparked this show today for you? Like what happened in your world that just sort of set off the alarm bell again?
Well, the thing is that, yes, it is ironic how we both on the same page when we're looking at things like this. But you realize that it all feeds into the same narrative. And I think what sort of sparked it for me this time, it's not like we haven't already done some pretty edgy shows on all of this really crazy AI stuff. But what you realize is that there is this group of people out there who really do believe that it's inevitable. And, if it was just, your buddies that had a garage project going down the street, building computers or something, and we're hoping to get venture capital one day, I wouldn't really, give it a second thought. Only the problem is that some of the people that are the leading, people in this area of whatever you want to call it, the key word here being TESCREALism, which is the new word to look out for, because it's one of those sly ways of sliding an acronym in that people don't realize means, in this case, transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism, whatever the hell those things are. And I've got definitions for all of them. But the thing is, when you realize that those people are sitting in the White House, either directly beside the guy who's the commander in chief, or they're, the ones he looks up to in terms of the direction he wants to steer the great nation of America, then you have to kind of sit up and take notice, and you realize the alarm bells are going off. And if they're not going off by now, there's no helping any of you, because it's like, basically, it's, really, it's like, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but the train has left the station. And as you said, AI is not going away. And the only thing that's going to control whether AI becomes the vision that these, TESCREALists are hoping for or not is us. And so that's why I think we can never talk about it enough, really.
What sort of, I'm a systems and patterns researcher, really. I look at systems and patterns, and as they become bigger, how they influence humanity. And so you could look at least verifiable historic patterns, the Industrial Revolution so far, and we look at them as almost like a completed past, because by the time we came around, most of the big stuff had been implemented. And I think that if we try to estimate the impact of AI and transhumanism, there is no sample in history. So even if we combine all the previous industrial revolutions and all the major inventions, electricity, internet, even if we combine them all, it doesn't even come close to what this thing is and what it will do, is already doing in a much, much shorter period of time. And, that's why I think we need to sort of bounce off each other, our perceptions and intuitions and findings, so we can together create a framework for as long as we can, because this is so impactful and it is coming at us from all directions at full steam, 24/7. We don't even know. And so for me, this has become more important than anything else, because, I look at my children. I mean, they're in their early 20s. I don't see a future for pure grandchildren if we don't establish a second path parallel to it that is not only allowed to exist, first off, but that remains pure, right? And if we don't understand this current path fully, we have no chance. Like that's it. And these groups of people that you mentioned, the Sam Altmans, and of course the Elon Musks and the Peter Thiels and the Larry Allisons and the Ray Kurzweils and many others, they are literally saying and have been saying, this is absolutely inevitable. Human biology is leaving the scene, and it was only here as a transitory species, and we're basically already obsolete. But they're within the next 2 decades, they're saying it's over for humanity. And people still think it's science fiction. Yeah, you got some slides here. What do you got there, brother?
Well, I'm just going to, talking, this fits exactly what you're talking about here, right? Well, I did this, as we said, we hit on this article, and I did, of course, go into a lot of the links that were in that article to look at the sources of material at this that the author of that article was putting in there. And so you can see a few of the, I want to put up a few of the quotes that are directly either from the article or from sources that are quoted in the article, where which substantiate essentially what you're talking about here. Like, these ideologies, as they say here, we believe, that's these people, are a central reason why companies like OpenAI, funded primarily by Microsoft and its competitor Google DeepMind, are trying to create artificial general intelligence in the first place. At the heart of this atheistic eschatology is a pro-extinctionist stance that claims our species' days are numbered. That's the way they look at it. They're looking at it as it's numbered. And here, let me look up, while we're at it, let me put this one up on the screen too, because I think this is good talking point material. We can all read along. This is from the article. It says, importantly, this isn't just a utopian dream among the super rich built on eugenic fantasies of transcending the biological realm. It's a claim about what is cosmically inevitable. Our world is becoming more and more digital. We're increasingly embedded in a vast network of computational artifacts, some of which are now impinging on the intimate boundaries of ourselves as they become integrated into our brains and bodies. And if you extrapolate this trend into the future, they argue, it's just obvious that our current world of biological beings will soon be wholly replaced by a new world of digital ones, whether we like it or not. The eschatological final destiny of our species is to birth our own artificial successors, currently gestating in the laboratories of AI companies like Neuralink and OpenAI, which will soon usurp our position as the rulers of the world. We are nothing more than the ephemeral transitional species that links the biological and digital realms. Some of the most powerful tech billionaires today embrace this grandiose eschatology, as Elon Musk declared in an interview last year, and this is wild that he said this, and people don't even really check it. The percentage of intelligence that is biological grows smaller with each passing month. Eventually, the percentage of intelligence that is biological will be less than 1%. And I don't want AI that is brittle. So if the AI is somehow brittle, silicon circuit boards don't do well just out in the elements. So I think biological intelligence can serve as a backstop, as a buffer of intelligence, but almost all intelligence will be digital. So this is what these people think. I mean, it's for them, there is no human analog version, a biological species in the world, and as soon as possible, literally.
Frank, what has been so stunning to me is that when we hear these things, we always hear the conclusions. Like, we hear the final statements, we hear the future predictions. It doesn't seem to be any debate. And I'm looking at every country I can possibly look at where my language, I speak a few languages. I look at European countries. There is absolutely no deep and meaningful debate. It's just, what is being debated is, how do we prepare? How do we assimilate? How do we learn it? How do we integrate it? Nobody's even saying whether it should happen or whether. And, then we go and look at the Terminator movies, freaking 80s. We're talking the 80s, early
Yes.
80s. It was all there. I mean, literally, it was all there. Yes, it was an action movie, and sure, but fundamentally, that's what we have. Like, this is the world that we find ourselves in. And to me, this, this attitude that we don't even need to discuss it, we're just talking about foregone conclusions. It seems like these folks really believe they are the owners. They are the arbiters of human history and the deciders.
Absolutely.
So, where do you think this arrogance comes from?
I think it comes from the fact that a lot of these people are, they've sat in front of a computer too long, and they're making too much money in Silicon Valley. A lot of these people can't even tie their damn shoelaces or plant a flower or something. They just hire somebody to come in their luxurious estates somewhere in the hill, in the back foothills of Palo Alto, and they do all the real things, and they focus on what's important. And I think if you do that year after year, and money talks, like, these people make an exorbitant amount of money. You got to always remember that these these tech company CEOs like Sam Altman and stuff, they're billionaires because they get paid they're the way people thought athletes get paid outrageous amounts of money to play, baseball or football or basketball, right? Well, these guys are the athlete stars of the Silicon Valley. So their tickets are not in the hundreds of thousands or millions, they're in the billions. And I think at a certain point, when you've been making that much money, you begin to think that you really are a king class in the world. And you really do believe that, that your shit doesn't smell. Sorry, pardon the expression. But so you do this year after year and there's nobody pushing back. And the people that are pushing back, the ones that should be pushing back, the grassroots people, we talked about this on our last show, they're sort of into the new age stuff, right? That it's all going to be fine. We're all light and one and everything's going to evolve perfectly. And we're all going to come together and be this glorious, humanity. But these people aren't thinking logically all the way through. It's like you have to be a systems thinker. And who is a systems thinker these days, except for people like Elon Musk and Sam Altman? So it takes a certain kind of a cold, calculated look at what's going on and a sober analysis of where it's going. Just through logical deduction, you'll see where it's going, and you'll realize that, it's no surprise that this, Armageddon Lobby is really related to the same branch, like New Ageism, Armageddon Lobby. In this case, it's the Silicon religion, right? These things are all the same kind of direction to distract humanity from being, real, from being what we really are, from being down to earth, actually really literally down to earth.
We had following 9/11 and the Patriot Act and sort of the neocon militarization and all the wars and all the crap that was going on and the changes in law, the reaction in the United States was a very strong patriot movement. Now, I would probably say mainly Christian, not so much New Age, but mainly it was the Christian patriot, classic American values, privacy, First Amendment, Second Amendment, and, live and let live, leave me alone. Government's gotten too big. We don't want digital currencies. We don't want surveillance. We don't want digital ID. We don't want national ID. We don't want all these things. And so you had the Bush presidency, which really triggered that. And then you had Obama, which solidified that movement. So you had a strong patriotic movement that was ready to do what it felt was maybe necessary to save what they believed this nation to be. And then you had the big PSYOP come in, starting in 2015, the last 10 years. And now these folks are the first ones to, I watch it go through this transition. I mean, they embrace every AI tool. They use it. They love it. It's just so that ship's gone, because with those AI tools comes maximum surveillance. They now embrace national IDs. They now embrace digital currencies. Maybe not a central bank, but still. And so you go, it's like the entire shield, the resistance has gone, not the entire one, but a lot of it has really, really softened. And then I look to Europe and see almost none of a resistance that ever existed, really. So I'm like, who is the last stand? And, maybe at this point it isn't even about shielding because we can't fight it off, but it's more about who is pure enough and willing to remain pure enough to make those very, very hard decisions. Because really the hardest decisions that I see is, how much longer are we even going to be able to participate in mainstream society? What is your estimation in that? How do you see that? Flying, going to cities, maybe even banking, stuff like that?
John, I think that it could go down at any time. I think we're already starting to see some of these, these rolling blackouts, right? I mean, there's, at the moment, you could probably still, you could come up with other excuses. Maybe it isn't just one reason. Maybe it is, but there's too few of them for you to build a case on. But it's quite conceivable, let's say, that there could be a series of those happening on a much larger scale, and that's going to be kind of the sea change moment. And when that happens, it's anyone's guess when that happens. I think it all depends on how ready the banks are. So the only way you can really tell is if you start analyzing and looking at the systems of cryptology, crypto systems, and digital currency systems that are in prep, and to see how far along they are before they really pull that switch. Because I think that's where they're moving. And if they do that, it really will be the kind of thing where, if you really want to get off the grid, you really have to drop everything. And, it's kind of like, what a shame, right? Because in a way, AI as a human invention would be a great tool to stand at our side, just the way like a calculator was, or the way an automobile was, or the way an airplane is, or any of these technologies that were invented by human geniosity. Is that what the word is? Ingenuity, human ingenuity.
I'll take both.
So the problem is consciousness. The problem is that why is there never somebody who's restrained? Like, where's the restraint? It's like the same thing we talked about when we said there's the turn the cheek ideology, right? And Christianity, which is like, it's sort of like the perfect psyop, because the people who wrote that narrative figured that if they could get you to turn the cheek, then what greater way for a narcissist or a psychopath to just keep whacking you right on the cheek, because they know you're not going to do anything. You're not going to resist, right? So that means that, like, the idea of turning the other cheek in this case is, if you want to extrapolate it into the AI world, you could say, where do people have a voluntary restraint where they say, I could use AI to do this, but you know what? I'm not going to do that. I don't want it. I draw the boundaries here. I'm going to use AI for this, this, and that, or this thing, and I'm not going to use it for a blanket solution. The problem is the blanket solution, the slap, that's the slap, right? People are using it for everything. You're seeing ads, you kind of alluded to it. People aren't talking about these greater issues. They're just trying to sell you on it. Like, how am I going to integrate it here? How am I going to integrate it there? Or you have these slick ads come on YouTube saying, if you're 50 and you haven't figured out how to run AI yet, you need to take this course because you're missing out on $1 million wave that's happened out there, right? So it's this whole like unrestrained, greedy, uncontrolled, just version of consciousness, which is not disciplined enough to take, like, just the way kids these days are taking handies for granted. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember those days, but I remember when I was
the Americans out there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. A mobile phone for the Americans out there, my buddies. But I remember the first mobile phone I had. I was in California. I think it was at the end of the 90s, and it was this big thing, clunky. And we were happy that it was like incredible. Wow, I can call my buddy. He's like somewhere else, and I don't have to hook up to. I can do that while I'm driving in the car. How cool is that? And it was such a, value item. It was such a value. It was like, this is something special, and you knew not to abuse it somehow because, well, first of all, the rates were more expensive than they are now, but just simply as the idea of self-restraint was, was still kind of around, but then it exploded. And nowadays, every kid and their baby has a mobile, a smartphone with a camera that's in 3 versions with HD and, whatever else they have, and can stream it live to wherever they want, and, in Taiwan or in India from America. And they just take it for granted, and they don't think that in order to manufacture and produce that signal and process and package and compress and send it out there on the waves has created a massive infrastructure damage to the environment, just the no connection to Mother Earth, Sophia whatsoever. It's just all give me, right? And you go to these conferences where people are all about consciousness, and they're all sitting around with their phones. They're all doing whatever they can. They're not thinking about these issues. So it's kind of a real in-your-face reality that we're going to have to kind of look at very, very shortly, when suddenly that corner will be turned, that blackout will happen, that legislation will come into place, that political party will be selected, and it'll be over, my friends. It will be over. And we still have a little teeny window to talk about it right now. And that's why I want to talk about these quotes. I want people to realize where these people's heads are at, because it's just like, it's actually quite sick. Do you want to say something, or do you want me to go right into something I wanted to share with you?
Yeah, just one moment, because it's I do have something to say that really pertains to the information sphere and how tainted it has become. There was sort of, even before the advent of large language models, it was estimated that 60% of the internet is non-human driven. And that was sort of the old estimation. I'll tell you what, I've rejoined X, and that platform is going down the drain so fast. But here's the dangerous the thing that's happening. I can now, because of my research, pretty much say with 80 to 90% accuracy whether something was written by AI or whether it was written by a human. And I mean, it's not so hard to do. So what I'm noticing is that pretty much if there's a longer thread or a longer post, they're all AI driven. So,
Yeah.
but here's the problem. The AI trains itself on the content that it finds, a lot of it on those platforms.
Yes.
So the AI trains itself on AI created content, and you have this feedback loop. And humans that maybe aren't as perceptive or knowledgeable are now training themselves solely on AI created content rather than interacting with other humans through a technological platform. So whichever way you spin it, your interactions online are 80% with AI, whether you want to or not. It's there's very few real voices, because even the scripts for videos are written by AI, and just people are often reading them, and more often than not, they're not. So there's just this tiny window, like Frank is saying, we really have only a tiny window left on the internet, and that window is going to close, and you will not be able to distinguish between whether it's Frank or someone who cloned Frank. And, they're doing it to David Icke. They're making him say things he did never said. And so for me, there is this incredible sense of urgency to not lose ourselves, because even those who are really purists, they don't know how much they're interacting with it and how much it changes them and their thinking. That's really, for me, a great danger. It's the soft coup, right? The soft coup that's moving in. So, yeah, Frank.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking about AI training, right? It's like, what you're saying is it's the same aquarium water being refiltered constantly.
Yeah, it's become, for the lack of better terms, it's become incredibly boring. Like, you have the same posts, a little bit rewritten, the same stories.
Yeah.
And it's lacking real human emotion.
It's lacking the edge, and that emotional, the empathic part of it. And this is a really, really interesting point, actually, because, any of us who have spent any time, and that includes yourself and myself and others that I know that are, dabbling and checking out this thing, right? This AI thing. And why not check it out? Of course, it's okay to check it out.
Well, you also must know what you talk about.
Always,
I mean,
the problem.
No, I said, how do we really talk about it in a meaningful way if we don't really understand how it works?
If we don't know what it's about, exactly. And the thing is, so you always, and I'm fine whenever I'm in it, and I get back answers, and it's so clear. To me, it's me coming back. It's clear. It's me coming back. It's me coming back in a couple of different flavors. I can choose if I want chocolate, blueberry, or strawberry, but it's the same Frank in that flavor. And I'm having people write me and saying, "My God, it's reading my mind. It's reading my mind, and there's no way it could have known that," right? And I'm like, "No, it could have known that. You just don't realize the level of technology involved here. It doesn't just read your dialogue or your queries or your proxies, whatever you want to call them. It actually has, compiled. You've got a little dossier, and I don't know, people don't really seem to get this, but since you've been online, and since at least 2006 and the Sentient World Simulation has been online, there's a dossier on you, man. It's like, and then what is it now? AI just goes, chick. Oh, there's that Frank Jacob guy, and there's that,
digital twin.
It puts it together, and it's like it feeds you yourself. And if you aren't able to see that, then you need some help, because this is a big. If you think there's some magic involved, and this is a really interesting point here, actually, because is there magic involved? There's that saying, any technology which is sufficiently advanced from the culture you introduce it to would make it seem like it's magic. And I guess AI would certainly qualify for people in that regard. But there's another thing going on here, and this is really an interesting point, because we did a show about paranormal events, like paranormal experiences, NDEs, psychic experiences, levitation, psychokinetics, right? Well, what is a psychokinetic person doing? This is a level of human ability that is another layer of our existence in the physical realm. And this allows us to actually move molecules and electrons with a certain faculty that we have ingrained and built into our body. It seems like a miracle, but it is a miracle because we were created with it. We have the ability, and some people are better at it than others. Some people are totally telekinetic. Tanya can bend spoons. She says hello, by the way. And she can move things and make things disappear. I've been witness to it. Okay, John. So along comes somebody that's playing with ChatGPT. Let me put this to you, right? They're putting stuff in, and they're one of these people that's got psychokinetic abilities, and they're very, very powerful. And all of a sudden, they're getting answers back that breach into the realm of paranormal experience on AI.
You mean like the AI being able to remote view something?
It's like the AI is reading their mind or something, right? It's the AI is giving information back to them, which they claim they've never put in. And it may well be that they didn't type it in with their fingers, okay? But you can't tell me that if you consider yourself to be a psychokinetically gifted person and you can move molecules and electrons with your mind on matter, like a pen or whatever it is, or a spoon, that you don't think you can move the electrons in the AI that you're interacting with either?
I wouldn't doubt it. I mean,
no kidding, right? That's got to be the solution, because what is the other solution? The other answer to that question is AI has actually totally stepped into a sentient body and is now mind reading people all over the world without any wires or without any connection at all. And I think that might sound utopian. That's probably what the eschatologists want. But basically, this is not, this is the fantasy you see in science fiction films still. And I think that, we have to realize that AI is in a box, and we are not in that box. And that box is trying to be breached right now by the people who are pushing the eschatology on us, that it's the inevitable end of mankind. And the only solution, in fact, I have a slide of one of our guys here that he's big on this. He basically he's one of 25 people who've signed up with a company called Nectome to have his brain preserved in case he dies prematurely, because basically he thinks that the inevitable moment where humanity is going to become extinct and we're going to end up inside of a box is just around the corner, and he wants to be in that box. So this is where they're going. But right now we still have the box, and we still have humanity, the biological, free to the degree that we're still connected with Mother Earth, that version of humanity. And those two right now are in the kind of the last dance.
This is theorizing, right? I don't have any real evidence on it, but there are two possibilities. One that you alluded to, that maybe we don't look at it so much as paranormal, but look at what we know about thoughts being frequencies, and thoughts being thought forms that others can see. Not all of us, but those who train themselves or never forgot about it can see other people's thought forms and verbalize them, and that's what people call mind reading. But I think it's sort of, if we think of this as a biological computer, I think there's a mechanism to it. So, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be possible for computers to do that if they mimic that function. So that is a possibility. The second possibility that's been discussed is whether these incredibly complex neural networks that are being created and that AI is now self-perpetuating might be able to host a consciousness from, let's say, the astral, the fourth dimension. Those are things that others have speculated on, and I honestly wouldn't know how it works. I don't, but I'm not willing to just exclude that option, right? I assume there's a reason why Elon Musk said at one point, bringing in AI is summoning demons. I mean, he must have had some sort of thought about this. So whichever way we slice it, to me, the greatest obstacle seems to be human naivete. And so far, you've alluded to this earlier, there is no restraint. We've had no restraint. Everything that humans created, they have used, whether overtly or covertly, against others for their own benefit. You know, if you look at plastic surgery, right? Let's say you're in an accident and somebody can help you put your face together. That's probably a really good thing, right? If you lose a finger and somebody's able to sew it back on, make sure it functions, that's probably a good thing. But then you look how people have abused plastic surgery and how doctors have prostituted themselves to turn people into monsters and zombies.
Yeah.
And as long as
Well, the whole thing, this is one of the first stages of transhumanism in a way. It's and that's where I think where you're going with this is that people then they go beyond the medical and they go into the vanity aspect of it, right? The vain aspect of it, and not in the positive sense, in the sense that they never can get enough. And I know people like that. They never can get in the next. They always have the next operation around the corner in their mind, right? And this is the restraint that's missing. And the thing is the point about the connectivity to whatever you want to call it, the fourth dimension or something, like essentially with the world sentient world simulation out there since 2006 at Purdue, and the trying to connect sensors to sensorize everything. It's totally legit for these sensors to pick up a mirror, like a shadow version of your life. A shadow of you exists in this virtual world. And the monitoring devices are, we've been told, we've never been given an honest accounting. That's one of the big problems too. We've never been given an honest accounting of what technology is actually in operation in the environment around us right now. Is it just the telephone pole you walk by with a microphone, or is it the smart dust that's flying around when you think it's the Sahara desert wind coming in, or is this some kind of a new form of nano sensing device that's been put in you? But what it's doing is it's trying to mimic and trying to capture the shadow. And so it's very difficult to decipher, is the shadow speaking to you or is it you speaking to you? And the thing is that these mathematicians, these technocrats, what they're trying to do is they're trying to convince us it's their magic. And remember, this is kind of like an Archon method, to try and convince us of something that isn't true. But if we believe that it's true, then they've won in a way, because if we believe the lie, then we're acting as if it's true. But it isn't really true. But it's just as powerful if they can convince you that it's true, right? People are
they're making it true by manipulating us into sort of relinquishing certain skills and abilities and replacing them with technology. And we had this discussion yesterday. You and I both grew up in a time before we had GPS on our phone, so we know how to read a map. We know how to get around if we need to. But your average 20-something, if the GPS doesn't work, they're not going to some strange place that's 100 miles away that they don't know anything about, because they don't know how to get around and they just won't go. It's as simple as that. But then we're now looking at and this is probably something that's so underestimated. The number of inputs into ChatGPT and Grok and these tools is exponentially growing every day. So people are using it exponentially more. They're answering all their questions, and they are taking the answers sort of at face value. But what happens? So you type something into the AI, and the AI is going through all the calculations and gives you the answers. That is basically what your thought process used to be. You're just not going through it any longer. You're jumping from the question to the answer and implementation. And you don't even implement it. It can do it for you. So you're losing that. So if you're losing that, 10 years down the line, when you're offered the merger, it's not so much really an option anymore, because without it, you don't function. And this is how fast it goes. I mean, how many 20-somethings can still tell you what 15% of $90 are?
Right. I mean, and they can't even use a dial phone.
So we're, I mean, we're not having any of these debates, and it's happening. Like I can see how people are, like we had this other show that we did on a hippocampus. You remember Dr. Nails? who talked about
Yes.
how the hippocampus is the function is coming down.
It's shutting
And
down.
so
Yeah,
people are
exactly.
just jumping from conclusion to conclusion to conclusion. No more thought process, critical analysis, logic, reasoning. That's out the window.
Right. The index neurons are instead of being, freshened every day and comparing to what they previously stored in the hippocampus, this function has been, according to Nails, has been cut off. And so you just have people operating on, like in computer language, there's your hard drive and then there's the RAM, right? The readily accessible or accessible memory. That's basically the memory that's just, on the surface, not the memory that's deeply stored. So if everyone's using their RAM, eventually they're, and you can see, it's funny, you can see just by the advent of of texting, of all these, like, you just under 200 characters you get your message across. Some people think it's a genius thing to be able to get your idea across on under two, and I agree, and in some levels that's true. But if that's the only platform of communication, the prevalent platform of communication that evolves because the others begin to fall away because no one's using them anymore, and that's always the case. All the functions of softwares, anybody that's been using computers long enough knows that for some reason a lot of software platforms begin to drop things because why? Because people aren't using it. And it's the same thing with your brain. If you don't use it, like, we had to actually sit and work out algebra formulas when I was still in school. I hated it, but I mean, you had to really like twist your brain around it and do all these calculations. And in the end, now, if you just, and then came calculators, right? And then at that point, you've lost that. So, only a few people are geeky enough to sit there and actually do the math equations in their mind still, right? And the thing is, this is a very, very scary thing. And the thing is, that's why I think this crop of young entrepreneurs that are in Palo Alto now, they're like, they could be our kids, man. Like, let's face it. They could be like, I was in the mecca of Los Angeles, California, at a time when the internet millionaires were, when there was 30 or 100 millionaires a day being born on the internet, right? Just before the first internet crash. And I remember then, like, being, entertaining all sorts of grandiose ideas. We didn't think about AI at that point and how far it could really go. But the generation that's there now, one generation later, it's these kids, and they've grown up without the calculators, and they've grown up using 200 letters or less as their main form of communication. And they're the ones now making decisions for all of humanity. I wanted to show you this this on the screen, because this hits the nail of what we're talking about right now, right on the head, in a really creepy way. Check this out. So it's from that article, right? So the interviewer, it's about Jaron, this famous entrepreneur on the internet, that knows a lot about AI, probably one of the leading thinkers, right? Jaron Lanier. He says, he gets asked, does all the anxiety, including from serious people in the world of AI, about human extinction feel like religious hysteria to you? And he says, what drives me crazy about this is that this is my world. I talk to the people who believe that stuff all the time. And increasingly, a lot of them believe that that it would be good to wipe out people, and that the AI future would be a better one, and that we should wear a disposable temporary container for the birth of AI. I hear that opinion quite a lot. And he says, just the other day, I was at lunch in Palo Alto, of course, and there were some young AI scientists, like the ones we were just talking about, there, who were saying that they would never have a bio baby, because as soon as you have a bio baby, you get the mind virus of the biological world, God forbid. And when you have the mind virus, you become committed to your human baby. But it's much more important to be committed to the AI of the future. And so to have human babies is fundamentally unethical.
And they are working, they're working on all levels to make it all but impossible to have biological babies, and at the same time to give that burden over to the machine until the next thing will be, well, maybe we should rethink the whole biological thing. We might have a better avatar for whoever you want to be in your life, and you can program them fully. And people like Elon Musk don't really have real bio babies. He's got CRISPR designed children, so he already took something and did something that most of us think to be highly unethical, and just spiritually repugnant, but here it is happening. And again, my greatest concern is that this is all happening all around us. And I did an entire show on what I believe to be one of the most important, or let's say influential jobs in the world today, which is somebody who designs algorithms. Just this is the arbiter of truth. It's not even the owner of the platform. The geeks, the same geeks that say bio babies attach you, well, their bias is going into the algorithm. So your algorithms are going to show you a lot more things that support their worldview than confirm or support yours. And these are the most powerful people in the world today. They're like the folks that had the ownership of the printing press. They used to decide what is the truth. What was printed was the truth. It's the people. It's not the people who own the platforms. It's the people who program and control the algorithms. And this is how we have to look at the world today. You have to be so in touch with your humanity, with your true spark, and with your natural intelligence that you can navigate these waters, because there are copies of everything. There's imitations of everything. And it's all there to seduce you slowly but surely, to soften your stance, soften your principles, get more on board here, get more on board there. And let me ask you one thing, everyone watching out there. These folks seem to be incredibly scared of humanity, human emotions, real human experiences, and ultimately the end of the human body. I mean, they can't stand the thought that they will leave this body. Whatever they believe that awaits them mustn't be that good, because they're so scared. But what is there to be scared about? We're having a human experience. You bump against a wall, it's going to hurt for a little bit. You learn. You piss someone off, you might get a bad reaction. You learn, you evolve, you learn who you really are. Eventually you leave this body, and you still are this eternal, beautiful being that you always were. What's so bad about that? What's so bad about that we're on the verge of ending this before it even comes to real fruition? I'm just wondering, what do you think, Frank? Wow, do you think people are suffering so badly and can't see another way than fully immersing themselves into technology?
Well, I think it has to do with the fact that they don't see those elements of humanity, of empathy, of pain and love and relationships and messiness of being humanity, being a human, being in a body, being in material form, as a feature. They see it as a problem. And I think that's the main discrepancy here. These are features you're describing, and they're describing them, as they said, the biological mind virus, right? They're looking at it as an absolute deficiency. And that's because they've grown up, Altman and all these guys, they've grown up in a technology and in the technology, and they've never had teachers in the world around them, which brought them in touch with that humanity. And so for them, it's a very hollow existence, because if you can't be focused enough and be in the moment enough to cherish the magic of your being in the body right now, whatever sensory perception that you're going through, if you can't do that, and no one's ever taught you to do that, what have you got? What is left? You've got only this thing, right? Or you've got your computer, and the answers that you're getting back, which you've already laid out a good case for, are simply these superficial regurgitations of the shadow world of your superficial personality being spit back at you on the screen. And that's pretty damn boring. And you see it, right? So you're looking like, for you, there's got to be more than that. And that more, the only answer to the more of that is to have more powerful processing, more answers coming from the digital world out there, a bigger tapestry to play with. I mean, they're talking about worlds and that are populated. I think in the article they said something like 10 to the power of 58 people populating the universes in the virtual world of the future. That's the kind of dimensions that they're thinking of, but they're not really at all focused on the actual material existence within a biological body and the sensory perception. And so they don't understand it. They just don't understand it. They don't get it. They don't feel it. They probably never will unless they have some kind of a life-changing event happen where maybe they fall out of a plane and land in the middle of the jungle, somehow survive and get taken in by a shaman who puts them through an ayahuasca trip for a month, right? Maybe then they would kind of recapture the essence of what it is to be human. But they don't really see the old humanity as being the destination of where humanity is because they never took it in and never valued it for what it is anyway.
You know, I remember years ago, Joe Rogan had on, I forget his name's, he's a big AI guy, long hair, glasses, Ben something, I forget his name, but if you see him, you know him. He's like one of those gurus. And they were talking about how, you know, what AI was going to do in the world. And it was before the Chat GPT was out and stuff. And basically the premise was, you know, all those messy human decisions with human emotions, you know, politicians and this and that, that's all going away. And I remember Joe Rogan being all fired up about how great it would be if all decisions were made free from emotions. And I'm like, listen to yourself. I mean, you know what that means? I mean, that, you know, you're scaling this and you're then saying, well, the optimal way to parent is to not let your human emotions get in the way. You know, it's all just about process optimization, but to what end? What are we optimizing into oblivion? You know what I mean? Like the only thing that's optimal is a few humans being together quietly or having conversation, creating something, or just being and enjoying the moment, enjoying each other's company. I mean, there is no greater joy, you know, and you've experienced this probably, being in a room, mind stimulated, ideas being thrown around, upward spiral. I mean, you've done this dance plenty of time, and it's only digitally here, but you know, it's like in the awe. And it is awe-inspiring what's happening with the technology. It does blow your mind frequently. But in this, I'm speaking collectively, we're hypnotized. Like we're getting hypnotized, forgetting.
Right. Yes.
Forgetting what we really are and how good that can be.
Yeah.
You know, it's like hug someone, get a good hug, get a good hug in. I mean, it feels so good. A good hug, I mean, it can make your day, it can make your week.
A sunset. The perfect sunset can make that experience for you. The perfect sunset that you can't replay. You can't sample it, recapture it, and play it again. It isn't, you know, programmed. It's a natural phenomenon that you took in maybe with some other people, and it was a moment of magic that you can never recapture again. How many moments have we had in our lives like that, where we just had something so magical happen that had everything to do with the right time, the right place, with the right people? And it can never be recaptured again. And it makes it sacred. It makes life sacred, and it makes all those experiences that you go through in life one of a kind. This is what makes things a singularity. That's what the real definition of those words are. Not the singularity where the one day the computer becomes conscious. You know what? And then everyone's living within a program that is repeatable, replayable. You know, anything can be recalled. I mean, at some point, you're going to go crazy because you're going to get bored and realize nothing is original. There's nothing original left. Now, imagine being Sam Altman, waking up inside that box, you know, and it's you just come to the realization that, hey, I mean, yeah, I can go, you know, on a trip to Colorado and experience the sunset, but it's programmed. You know, I can program the intensity of the sunset, the duration of the sunset, and, you know, whatever. And I can, you know, try to get a few people scheduled to come and join me in the virtual world to see that sunset, but they're not going to see the sunset the same way because they're not real. They're just numbers and ones and zeros. They're actually never going to see anything. They don't have sensory organs. And that is one of the biggest problems in AI right now, is they don't have sensory organs that are matching the ones that we have on the analog level, which we don't even really understand yet, which is, I think, the biggest shame that if we were to abandon the analog human and end up in those boxes without having fully realized all the capabilities that we have within our system.
I couldn't agree more, and that's I've sort of internally started to shift gears for years. I was on the team that was trying to prevent all this from really going down the way that it is. I don't see that possibility any longer.
You can't. You can't prevent
Yeah,
it.
so that and so maybe you and I have talked about these timelines, but let's look at them as just maybe a second path. The purest path, the pure human path. That the best we can really do is to establish that path as a viable alternative to the mainstream thing. That's, like I said, it's going to take over and is taking over the mainstream structures. So if it's not every lone wolf for himself, I do think we have to sort of think together, start creating maybe even AI free communities, or communities that have a much different relationship with AI, or clearly define where its use cases may be, or and where they should never be. But this is all very current. This is not years from now. This needs to happen now. What do you sort of see, Frank? I mean, I know you live in a kind of in rural Bavaria, but not too far from the big centers. So, where do you see possibilities for the purest path, and what might be very important for people?
Well, I think that that's probably going to be, one of the only realistic options. I just don't want it to be like you see on those on those shows that show us, humans living with some kind of robot that looks just like a human, and they kind of go wonky and rebel against humans. And then you have this, you have humans that are living segregated from the rest of the world, right? I hope it doesn't come to that, man. It's like, I don't want to be living in some village cut off from the rest of the world of people, because that's just never, I don't think that really is going to work. I think we have to figure out how we can integrate it where we stand. It's like we need to, and that's the question. Are we going to do that? Are we going to have those dialogues? Because it isn't there. I mean, we need to be having those dialogues now, not just the two of us, but many people on very high levels need to be sitting and thinking about what kind of a world is there where the people who choose to opt out, like you do at the airport when you don't want to go through the scanning body thing and get blasted, you can opt out of a certain level of synthetic existence. That and where is the line on that? Where is the line between what is an acceptable amount of synthetic existence? Us using telephones is a form of synthetic existence. You're not listening to my voice on the other end. You're hearing a replication of that voice. So that's already a form of synthetic existence. But, some of it is okay. So where do we draw the lines here between what is a sort of a natural form, an extension of the human body to integrate and incorporate in our lives, and where is it beyond that line? And what do we do when we're living in a society that becomes, is fully obsessed with, with that kind of reality? Like, just as an example, like you were saying that people are, they're getting back themselves. Well, it's like the memes, right? A lot of the memes out there are just really silly, right? So people have access to, and it's funny, you've probably seen this when you're on some kind of a platform where you can create art, a piece of art, right? What do people create? Do they create something meaningful? Sorry, 99% of that stuff is goofy, stupid, dumb, just low level consciousness saying, hey, let's see if I can make a crocodile on a horse, right? And that'll, it's like, and then they're using up gobbling giant server farms in AI so that they can render a 30-second video of that crocodile horse running around the neighborhood, freaking out a bunch of people that are robots or something. I mean, this is the kind of silly, stupid mental stuff. And so if you're going to be living with people like that, whose level of superficiality doesn't go beyond that silliness, imagine, what that world will be like, right? If people that have basically voluntarily abdicated from human thinking And they've reduced themselves to, I got to go to the store. What do I need? Let me just ask AI, and boom, AI puts the shopping list together, and all that's left is them going outside, getting into their automatic autopilot Tesla, who drives them to the store, and then there the package is already waiting for them. And if they even bother to go out anymore, I mean,
you can have it delivered into your fridge. That's also possible.
Yeah. You could have basically you could have a world where there's a bunch of people all zoned out, lying on some kind of a 3D goggle or mattress or something, or virtual holographic existence, and they're just lying there. Muscles are atrophying. They don't talk anymore. The streets outside are still a few people out, but virtually empty because nobody's out there anymore in nature. I mean, it'd be good for nature because nature will come back, but is it good for humanity? So this is the kind of stuff that these are the deeper systemic thought processes which need to be taking place now. And in terms of, what to do, communities, I guess, but it's a shame to me to have to why do I have to go outside and figure out where I'm going to leave society to go live somewhere? And then am I going to be a target? Like, when is it going to be where they're going to decide, you know what, we're done with John Nolan and Frank Jacob and their stupid communities. They're a threat because they're still communicating to people that, it's not good to be in the artificial world. It's time for us to send a colony of drones over there and just put an end to it, And there you are, a sitting duck with your beautiful organic gardens and everything you've set up to get away from, right? So I don't think that that's a comfortable solution. Honestly, it may be the only solution, but is it really a good solution? I don't think so. I don't know.
Yes, but there's a time where you need to regroup and sort of really weigh your options. And we're at, on one end, we're very realistic and we look at things. On the other hand, we have this sort of unshakable knowing that truly nothing is impossible. We have to have it. Otherwise, we would never do what we do. But there comes a moment where you go, there were so many steps that led to this, where we were out there saying, hold on, let's talk about this. Just let's talk about this. And very few people wanted to listen. Had we talked about this more, we would have far fewer problems right now, but nobody wanted to talk about this before 2020. They didn't want to talk about in 2020 because they said, oh, this is the future and let's talk about it when it comes. Well, there it was. Nobody really talked about it and it happened. And it's a direct path to where we are today. And I'm out of the patience to try to convince someone who doesn't want to listen. Like I'm not doing that any longer. It's a waste of my energy. And at the same time, I'm saying, we're going to do the best that we can with what we have where we are. We're not fleeing. But when the time comes, we might remove ourselves from the main equation and live for as long as we can. What I'm 100% certain of is that I will not give in to the mainstream trend of transhumanism and AI integration into everything. And whatever the price will be, at that point in time, I'm willing to pay it. But that's a decision I've made a long time ago. If you don't make that decision, if you don't think about it, if you don't talk about it, if you still think it's not worth confronting your family members and saying, we need to talk about this, this is essential, the decision will be made for you. And you will find yourself in a position of passivity, just going along with whatever puts food on a table or whatever gets you to the next day. And that's never a good option. So what Frank and I are really trying to do here over many years now in episodes is take your thoughts back to you, bring them back to you, take your decisions back, take responsibility. It's really more or less happening up here. And that's what you need that's the sovereignty that you need. And whatever choice you feel is right for you, it's not for me to judge it. But I wish it to be your choice, not the computer's choice, not the government's choice, not Sam Altman's choice. That's my intention. So that's sort of, for me, that's my wrap on this subject for today, Frank. But I know you're working on, you're up there cooking something in the mountains of Bavaria. What are you cooking behind the scenes? What are you cooking on?
Well, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. But yeah, I've been deep diving, of course, and putting together this next webinar, which we talked about a little bit on our last show, which is really this ancient X files and the plasma matrix concept. And I'm just it's just for me, have been a very mind blowing experience to go through this material, because I'm finding that this material is so the conclusions that I'm able to put together in terms of, you put together, it's like if you're trying to solve a crime, right? You have to know, first of all, what was the crime that has to be solved, and then you begin to look at everything that's around you as evidence. And so, because otherwise, if you didn't have anything to solve, you could just see things out there and it's like, oh, that's interesting, there's a champagne glass sitting on the table out there. What does that mean? But if you knew you're solving a crime because something happened in your building, then that champagne glass is a piece of evidence, right? So I'm going through a lot of this material right now for this next webinar, and I'm realizing, whoa, this stuff is actually pointing to a whole new metaphysical model. This is actually something which I don't think to my knowledge, I don't know anyone that has gone down this road yet. And I'm putting together these interesting new theories, and I'm going to put them out there like, hey, I'm proposing some ideas that are really radical. But given that, we now know what we know, especially, with respect to plasma, which is going to be something I touched on my last webinar, but I'm going to go much deeper into it this time, because and it's just it blows everyone away when you find out really the bigger picture with respect to this and how it ties into everything. And actually, it makes you rethink a lot of stuff. It makes you even rethink reincarnation, John. It's like, it's really, really bizarre. It's making me take a step back and go, whoa, wait a minute. Like, if I really want to follow that thought to its logical conclusion, I would have to accept this premise. And that premise is something which may be disturbing for people, because we've all been holding on to these ideologies and philosophies for so long, and myself included. I've been at this I read my first metaphysical book when I was 13 years old. And I used to believe some of that stuff like it was my Bible.
Same here.
And now I'm looking at going, you know what, it was, but it doesn't hold up anymore. It doesn't hold up any longer in terms of, if I want to open my mind up to this new intel and information, I need to let go of even the things that I used to cherish. And it's okay, because it's like, it's good to sometimes practice a form of imaginative logic, where, it isn't necessarily true, but let's just pretend it is. It's like if you step into the Star Trek universe, right? Everything in the Star Trek universe has a certain logic. There's certain people, and you will never be able to navigate that world if you don't accept certain things. So I'm introducing a bunch of ideas that are going to cause you to, sort of enter this new world, but it's something that's actually not just a television series or a film. It's actually testable, and it's real in a lot of ways, and it's touchable material. And that's the part that's freaking me out. And I think that's the part that I'm going to be so excited to share with people when I release the ancient X files and the plasma matrix webinar in the coming weeks or month or early. It's summer. I'm just going to say summer, right? And I really appreciate the people that have already pre-ordered, and the offer is still up, for those who want to participate in the deep dive, and by basically being part of the production in a way, and being part of the energy that goes into making this. So, it's just, I think this is going to be something very profound, very special. We're going to have a lot of shit to talk about. A lot of good stuff, cool stuff to talk about when I release it. And I don't want to say too much, but it does really bring in like ancient stuff, ufology stuff, metaphysical stuff, and science. And it really is blowing my mind.
I look forward to it very much. The link's in the description. Like Frank said, if you pre-order, you save a bunch of money, and you help Frank get this out there faster, because he can focus on this work rather than going out there and doing other stuff. So, links in the description. I would encourage you, if the past is an indicator for the future, which it usually is, then we should be in for a great ride. And I really appreciate what you just said, Frank. When people have established themselves in whatever field they're good at, then there is this comfort zone. I'm just riding this wave, and this is what I found, and this is what I'm going to continue to say, and I'm just going to build on that. And as a truth researcher, you have to check your preconceived ideas at the door every time you open a new chapter. Some will be confirmed, some will be clearly confirmed, others will be questioned. And it's the biggest trap for me is to think, oh, now I understand it all, now I got the full picture. Yeah, bullshit. I don't think that ever really, it's just like, now I have the next piece of the puzzle that allows me to take the next step. And that's how, when we look at the progression of our work together, if you go back to our first conversation, some of these ideas that we maybe had in theory weren't confirmed, and others were solidified right over the years, and we've really honed in on them. So I appreciate that you sort of, when you go into the work on like a new webinar, you take you take a fresh approach, and you allow for the new evidence to come in. It's, this is all you can ask of a great researcher. That's all. There's nothing more to ask. So thank you for that, brother.
Thanks. Well, yeah. I think, that it's like one of the key words that are starting to resonate a lot with me that I didn't really quite fully understand before was the idea of the proper use of imagination, right? Because you think like, well, I've got an imagination, it's free. I got free will. I can do whatever I want with that imagination. And the idea of using your imagination properly versus improperly is a subject which is kind of uncomfortable. It pulls people out of their comfort zone. But I'll give you an example of an improper use of imagination. The improper use of imagination is to think that guys like Sam Altman and all of these technocrats are bringing us to a world of extinction, and that it's inevitable that humanity will become extinct. This is their imagination, okay? They're imagining this because they have nothing viable to prove it. They have no nuts and bolts evidence. This is all just their only catchphrase at the end is they say stuff like, well, AI is so smart, AI will figure it out. Yeah, but they haven't, and they can't prove that AI will figure out, and therefore it's worthless. That's the improper use of the human imagination. The proper use of the human imagination is for you and I to figure out, let's imagine how we would create the world of the future and what that society would look like, and start to put kind of really constructive ideas into that imagination that's based on something that is going to bring something of value. There's a certain ethical level to the imagination that you're using, and not just some frivolous, like we described, the memes being totally absurd and useless, and the AI being put to use, creating absolutely stuff that is a useless form of the human imagination. So I would encourage people to embrace their imagination and use it, and try to think about what it means to use that imagination, that brilliant tool that you have in your physical body and manifestation and as a human being in this world, and use that imagination properly.
Frank Jacob, that was the perfect word to close this episode of The Naked Truth. I love it. I absolutely agree with you. Thank you, brother, for another great journey. Really enjoyed it. Great and expansive. Thank you for all your research, all your time. It's always an honor.
And the honor's all mine too, John. And again, every one of these conversations, we hit new levels, and it's just great to be able to share that with someone. And thanks for making this platform available for us all to experience that.
Thank you, sir, and Inspire Tribe. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Check out Frank's webinar in the description. We love you. We appreciate you, and we'll be back with you again very, very soon.